Hello and welcome to AI for the North webinar on our digital knowledge sharing platform, Innovation Exchange, powered by AI Technology. Today's panel couldn't be more evenly balanced, with the presence from local authority of leading city driving digital innovation in the North, a rep from national network of ambitious tech SMEs transforming next generation ideas into real world solutions, rep from a School of Coding of North responsible for shaping the future of many. And myself, I'm an AI strategist and technologist to answer your tricky questions. So I would like to highlight that we'll be hearing from our expert panel who are driving innovation in their own unique way, and we'll be sharing their views on what's happening with AI in the North. I'm sure their journey will be valuable advice for us, and in fact, applicable to all of us in one way or the other. They'll be addressing challenges and discussing opportunities to empower you and bridge the digital divide. Last but not least, accelerating your journey as a community. It's great to see that we have 210 people registered for our event over lunch, and thank you so much for joining us today. So just to highlight, today's session is organized in partnership with Leeds Digital Festival, a festival which is running for 2 weeks, bringing world-class events and lots of tech events for tech lovers, and also including AI for the North discussion today. So our first guest today is Eve Roodhouse, Chief Officer of Economic Development at Leeds City Council. I would like to bring Eve onto the virtual platform, please. And if you could kindly introduce yourself and let us know what you do and how you sort of try to democratize AI in the North.
Hi, Sherin, and hi, everybody. My name's Eve Roodhouse, as Sherin said. I work for Leeds City Council and I lead on economic development. And that's quite a broad portfolio, which is why I love doing the job I do. So it covers everything from business support, which of course is more important than ever. And we've been very busy on that since COVID-19. But also promoting Leeds as a great tourist destination and a place to grow your business and locate your business. And working with sectors across the city to help them grow. And we do a huge amount of work with the digital sector in Leeds to help ensure that that sector in particular can be successful. And so my interest in data and AI kind of spans that perspective of how can we help every business become a digital business, and how can we make sure that we capitalize on data, AI, ML in the context of our economy and the success for our city.
Awesome, thank you. Let me now invite our second guest, Harry Davies, Applied AI Lead at TechNation. So Harry.
So hi everybody, my name's Harry. I work at TechNation, which is a UK government-backed body, and it's a growth platform to really champion and support the UK's most up-and-coming scale-up businesses across the country. So we've supported in our programs around about 500 companies to date, and many of which are recognized. So companies like Monzo, Revolut, Darktrace. I specifically focus on AI scale-ups at TechNation, so I run our AI focus. And we've had 50 AI first companies go through that to date. And we all are solving really sort of applied challenges across things like diagnosing cancer or combating climate change or what have you. So looking forward to talking about that and talking about really the overlap of AI and entrepreneurship.
Fantastic, thank you. Our third guest is Lucy Galway, Partnership Success Manager at Northcoders. Lucy.
Hi, Sherin, and hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. So as Sherin said, my name's Lucy. I'm the Partnership Success Manager at Northcoders. I am a non-technical Northcoder, so I'm here to offer my expertise on many of the different things that our business does. For anyone who hasn't heard about Northcoders, we are a company that specialises in technical training for individuals wanting to enter the technical industry. And we also provide support and further training for companies as well, wanting to develop and train their staff in specialist methods and projects moving forward within the tech community.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And last but not least, myself. So I'm Sherin Mathew, CEO and founder of AI Tech North, which is the largest AI ecosystem in the North. I'm an AI evangelist by heart, but strategist, success manager, and a technologist by profession. most of the time. My background is all about delivering success with business data and helping businesses with business intelligence, advanced analytics, and AI. Previous experience with IBM, Microsoft consultancy. I'm absolutely passionate about assisting businesses with AI readiness and actively work with various startups, SMEs, and how I can accelerate their development and build beneficial solutions for them. As you probably must have noticed, that I'm absolutely passionate about AI and the value of community, and I truly believe the power of community is the way forward. And that's what brings us all here today. So without further ado, let's move on to our panel discussion. So I think the Q&A section is available, and please post your questions there. But I think I'll start with first question to Eve. Eve, I would like to hear if, as a local authority, you must have so much data, so many processes, and lots of digital application to manage across the city. It will be interesting to understand, how does city stay on top of innovation and all this tech, and how do you adapt change? And what would you recommend to anyone who's sort of taking that step forward?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We've got a lot of data in the council itself, and also we've got a lot of data-based organisations across the city as well. So in Leeds, we've got NHS Digital, for example, who obviously are kind of like the ONS of health. We've got some great data assets at the university and in other institutions. So in some ways, as a city, we're kind of really quite advanced in our thinking and our doing. So we quite a long time ago created Leeds Data Mill, which is now Data Mill North, and committed to getting as much data as we possibly could out there as open data. And that's been really, really successful. And off the back of that, we've kind of long established kind of innovation labs where we kind of work together with partners across the city to introduce kind of new tools. So quite simple thing, but we've had things like a bin app that we developed for the city, which people love because it kind of tells people when to put which bins out. Sometimes you can forget which week it is and so on. And that was particularly helpful during COVID, actually, because we kind of didn't stick to the same kind of routine of collections. So on top of that, we're in the process of setting up a living lab in the city. So looking at more around some of the smart tech that we can deploy across the city. And we've been doing some work through the Eurocities network, of which we're a member, to learn from other cities like Sherin, Bilbao and Eindhoven, to make sure that we can create the best products which you can then spread out across the city to maximise the kind of data from that. What I would say though is that kind of we probably don't maximise the data we've got in the council enough as yet. It's partly down to kind of the financial kind of challenge we've got in local government, but I think our hope is that over the coming years we'll be able to kind of join some of that data up more effectively to make more intelligent decisions. So just briefly as an example, during COVID-19, we obviously wanted to understand as much as we could about what was going on in the economy. But our data about sort of rates payments is not routinely linked to, for example, data about our tenants in some of the properties that we rent as a landlord, and it's not routinely linked also to data that sits in the council around who are our suppliers. So it's not easy in any shape or form to be able to capitalise on that data. So just like every other organisation, I think we've got some way to go on our own digital maturity. So I hope that gives you a bit of a sense of kind of the landscape.
Absolutely, that's great. Thank you so much. Harry, next question for you. You work with fast-paced tech startups. Can you please share why some AI businesses succeed and some they don't? And if you could sort of throw some light on it.
Yeah, sure. It's almost worth a webinar in itself in many ways.
Yeah.
But I think really, I suppose those that we see doing well are really those that aren't purely excited by the technology in itself. So it's very easy to get excited about AI for the sake of AI. But actually, I think the ones that really go on to scale are those that are genuinely solving a problem for somebody. Otherwise, really, it's an academic project that it's very hard to extract economic value out of. So you would need to look at what makes sense for the problem that I'm solving, and that could be machine learning, but it could also be something else. And I think it's very much attaching yourself to what am I really trying to solve here and for whom. And I think that problem has to be large enough and meaningful enough. So one of the companies that we've supported is Savest, for example, and they're looking at using AI to understand the impacts of climate change and really looking at how will that affect certain geographies and what will that mean for decision making. And that's obviously a massive challenge and certainly will be over the coming years. So they're really in a market that's really large enough and gives them enough room to grow and to develop and to scale. And I think all of them are brilliant at convincing top talent to work for them. And that I think is both technically, obviously. So I think pulling in the best data scientists, not just across the country, but across the world, really. And I think all of the companies that we see go on to do the best are very international from day one, but then also commercially as well, right? So great having a really robust data science team, but you also need people to sell the product and to market it. And that's so important. And then finally, I think it has to be defensible. So, if it can be easily copied by somebody else very easily, it's very hard to build that into something that you can sustain over time. And then finally, it's really finding the right investors. So investors that really understand that scaling an AI company is quite different from scaling a more generalist software company, and there's unique challenges inherently in doing so. And so I think finding the right investors there is really, really important.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Really insightful. It's like gold dust level information there, which is pretty interesting, and I'm sure everyone will find that very, very helpful. Everyone, audience, if you have more questions, please post it in your comments tab on the left. Next one, Lucy. From a coding perspective, what is the uptake of AI in general from students and businesses in the North, and what are the opportunities, jobs, and challenges that is out there at this minute?
Yeah, so actually, I'd love to draw from what Harry just said about passion for the technology and sort of solving problems, because Northcoders is all about helping people to break down complex problems so that they can solve them easily. That's the whole purpose of the bootcamp course that we do. So we teach people to write algorithms very early on in the course. So by the time our students get to sort of the project phase, which is the final section, some of the teams have created apps that have used elements of AI and machine learning already, from being exposed to it only for a matter of months in the industry. Some of these projects including creating chatbots. One of the projects that we saw was training a model to pick up changes of photos in rashes, and basically what it did is alert doctors in case the rash became dangerous or worse or anything like that. So some really, really innovative and cool things coming from people that have not been exposed to technology from a coding perspective at all before in their life. So another example is we've had a number of our alumni that have gone to work with companies that use AI, like PKI, Digital Bridge, BAE, Applied Intelligence, just a couple of companies that we work with who are really sort of thick in the middle of this type of technology. One thing that was really cool that a group of our Northcoders alumni did was we contracted a group of them out to a legal and general owned company, and it was to specifically build an AI project. So there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of movement, and I think from the role that I do at Northcoders, working in partnerships, the clue is in the job title, success manager. It's really, really key. So what's really interesting for me is how we're starting more and more to work with companies that are focusing on AI, machine learning, that have a data-driven approach to development. We have some Northcoders that have found themselves working in data science teams or working towards working as part of that team because of the interest. It's really interesting to see that the students we have coming through being so passionate about being innovative. I know Harry said it's not everything to be excited about the technology, but I strongly believe that this is where it starts and this is where it stems from for these individuals to be successful and to move into roles like this.
Awesome. That's really great. And I think it's good to see that there's that even balance of, how do you get started? And once you get started, how do you apply? And then once you apply, how do you sort of scale out? And I think we got that perfect balance across the panel here today. I think this is a general question to all of you, which is, what are the opportunities available in the space of, for businesses, startups, and professionals to adopt AI? So this open question, anyone can start. Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to give a bit of a sense from a sort of SME perspective. So kind of, obviously, one of the things that is our commitment in Leeds is we want every business to be a digital business. So we want businesses that are not like specifically digital to look at what the opportunities are for them to adopt technologies. And, in terms of AI, we don't want kind of SMEs to look at the term artificial intelligence and think, well, what does that mean? And can I even use that? And I think it's about demystifying some of it to say, well, some of this is about looking at tools like chatbots that can help you kind of improve the customer journey for different customers, and kind of demystifying some of that. And we have a great kind of support program called Digital Enterprise that we run across the Leeds City region. And we're looking in the next phase to build in some aspects around artificial intelligence to kind of further to support some SMEs around some of that to help them take it on. And I think one of the things that I guess we're interested to get others' views on as well is how do kind of leaders in SMEs educate themselves around some of the ethics around AI? Because I think there's a really interesting thing about if you're going to use AI, you need to be able to understand it and be able to explain it to your customers. In fact, that's an obligation under the Information Commissioner's Office. So how can kind of small business owners kind of do some of that? And clearly we're looking to try and do some of it through Digital Enterprise, but would love thoughts from the rest of the panel as well on that.
Sure. Harry, do you want to take a stab on that one?
Sure. I mean, couldn't agree more. I think really demystifying AI is I think really important. I think when we talk about AI, we can get lost in thinking about super intelligent robots or minority reports or general intelligence, but actually I think it's potentially more helpful to think about automation, and ultimately wherever you have a relatively predictable, repeatable manual process, there's potential there for it to be automated in some way. And there's huge potential then really across all sorts of companies and businesses and sectors really to be more productive with machine learning in some way. So really I think now I think we're increasingly seeing more vertical applications of machine learning that really automates a very specific use case or challenge or niche in some way. Very similar to, I think Benedict Evans talks about, it's almost analogous to a washing machine at home, right? It's very specific, and you're not going to use that for everything in your house. It's not going to take over your job, but for that specific task of washing something, it's particularly useful and gives us so much time back in our day. And that's almost analogous to how we can think about machine learning these days. For specific use cases that can benefit from automation. That it's a fantastic resource. So I think we'll increasingly see that, and increasingly see vertical applications that give people time back in their diary, but allow us to do more things that are value adding to our job and our role. And I also agree on the ethical point of view there as well.
I'm seriously stealing that washing machine analogy. That's great.
But a great article by Benedict Evans, I think, he talked about it. But I think it's a great way to look at machine learning and how we think about AI.
No, that's really, really interesting, and I can now relate to that. Even I'm going to steal that at some point. Lucy, do you want to add something to that in terms of opportunities?
Yeah, I think just sort of a general opinion from me is that I think that developers are some of the best positioned professionals to leverage AI. They already have a hands-on technical experience and out of the box, AI tools. I mean, they can easily integrate intelligence into their web and mobile applications. So I think they're in a really good position to utilize these types of things. But yeah, I think talking about and thinking about the ethical side of it would be a whole nother webinar in itself. Something that companies would always need to be really cautious about while using these tools. But yeah, I agree with the other panelists 100%.
Awesome. And just to add on to that, I'm actually a guest lecturer in a couple of colleges and local universities, and one thing that I say is most of the businesses just think that, oh yeah, coding, you just need a data scientist and that's it, AI is done. Some people think, oh, I got the fund and I got the leadership drive and executive support. Yeah, that's it, AI is done. But I think most of the projects fail because of the various barriers that people are not aware of, such as one is obviously data, then you got the regulations, ethics, and empathizing with your stakeholders, the users who will be the end users facing and engaging with this AI app. Last but not least, people usually forget that leaders and data scientists together sometimes doesn't work. You probably need that middle tier, which is the designers. And we forget that because AI value chain is so complicated. There's so many things to do. There are so many factors, not just ethics and regulation, data compliance, business requirement, ensuring that leadership and the vision embeds into that model and the design to give you that outcome through the tech. So 3 key roles are leadership, the designers, and the data scientists or the developers. And people usually forget the one in the middle. Without designers, they're not able to sort of translate the idea or a problem statement into a solution. And that's where most of the projects fail. So one thing that we do as a power of community is to really make this transparent, make this entire value chain transparent, entire strategy to deliver AI transparent. And I think one great opportunity out here for everyone is to leverage the power of community and learn from mistakes of others instead of work smarter in simple way. And awareness leads into AI readiness, so that helps in minimizing waste and accelerating your journey to delivering a beneficial and trustworthy solution. So yeah, sorry. That's I think is my take on that. I think we're getting some interesting questions from our audience. I'm going to read out one from Colin Bird. Thank you for your question. Great topic, but a key question for growing the interest in AI and business. How can you showcase key examples from end to end for the Joe public and every business without losing them in jargon? Wow.
I think there's some great examples in health actually that are kind of easy for people to get their head around. So before I worked at Leeds City Council, I worked for NHS Digital, and through kind of networks there, some of you might be aware of some of the work that was done at Moorfields Eye Hospital. And they worked with kind of consultants there around a kind of diagnosis of a particular eye condition, and developed the kind of machine learning to the point where actually the diagnosis was more accurately done by the machine than by the clinician, meaning also that then that clinician could spend the time doing the higher value work, which is actually treating the condition. When I had that explained to me, because it was a couple of years ago when I was just starting to learn about AI a bit more, machine learning and AI a bit more, I thought, yes, I get that. I really understand that now. What you've been doing is looking at all the data from the consultants around what they've done, and you build all of that up, and then you kind of explain that to a patient and give them the choice. And actually, they said they had a result where most patients chose the option of having diagnosis through the machine, and they were told it was more accurate than the consultants. So I think for me, there's something about telling those end-to-end stories in a way where people can kind of truly understand what it means. And back to Harry's analogy about the washing machine, that's a prime example, isn't it, where you're like freeing up time from a high value consultant, but how you explain the ethics around that, again, I know we don't want to spend the entire time discussing that, but there are questions in my mind about on that one about going, well, in so doing, do you then lose the knowledge and expertise and capability of consultants? And do you take away something from junior doctors in terms of their learning as they're coming through, if they're not going to be doing some of that diagnosis? And it's those types of questions that we have to let the public get into as well, to sort of like actually make sure we're happy with where we're actually adopting AI.
Yeah, I think in terms of making it very clear. I think it's very easy to get bogged down in when you're speaking to a customer in the technology and you know the fundamentals of AI. But actually, it really comes down to, I think, really what's the problem you're trying to solve for the customer, and what benefit does it have for them in some way. And usually that's going to be, you know, you're saving the money. You can make a process just far more efficient. Maybe you can scale what you do in order of magnitude more. So I think really it comes back down to, you know, how do you ultimately tie it back to what the customer really cares about? A really clear example might be Grey Parrot, for example. So they use computer vision to essentially increase the amount that waste manufacturing plants recycle. So at the moment, we only recycle a tiny fraction of what can be recycled because it's very manual. It's something that is very inefficient. And using a combination of robotics and computer vision, you can really accurately determine which plastics ought to be recycled and which ought not. So, you know, using their solution, you can talk a lot about the AI, the computer vision, and the technology that goes into it. But ultimately, for the customer, what they really care about is, you know, I can now recycle 10, 20 times more than I used to be able to. And I can do that in a much more efficient way than I used to be able to. So I think it's really, you know, how can you describe it in really clear language that ties it back to a benefit that somebody really, really cares about?
Lucy, do you want to add anything onto that?
I was just going to, so I wouldn't be someone that could give a good example of an AI product, but what I could give an example of is how Northcoders is a complete non-jargon company, and that's because there's people like myself who is non-technical. We have there's not many of us at Northcoders that are classed as non-technical Northcoders, but there is a few of us. So from what Harry was saying about a business perspective, a customer perspective, a selling a product perspective, I think it's really, really key to have somebody that can level with the particular person that they're speaking with, depending on what their knowledge is. For Northcoders, we have further training programs that we offer to developers, and now, although I understand all of the sides of the program, I may be talking to someone who is even more non-technical than I am. So being able to
Lucy, we just lost you for a second there.
Oh, can we be heard?
Yeah, you're back now. Yeah, can you? Yeah, go on.
I'm back now.
Yeah. We just lost you for a few seconds, if you don't mind repeating. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So just to sum up, the input I had onto that question is that I feel very strongly that working within the tech sector, having a non-jargon approach is really, really important, because your customer could range from super technical to, you know, no tech at all, depending on what department that you're talking with. And it's something that I spend a lot of my time doing, being very customer focused within businesses.
So, okay, thank you. I just can you all see my screen? Yeah, that's good. For Colin, I got a framework called Simple AI. So I think I use this as 7 simple steps to get started with AI. So first, S stands for strategically start with a problem. If you got a problem and if it can be solved with AI, only then you go to the next step of innovation. Obviously, the next step, I, is innovate. When you innovate, you choose the right tech. If you are solving a problem, which is pretty much, let's say, empowering people or engaging with the customer, or optimizing your operations and process, or transforming your tech landscape completely. If this is your problem, you choose the right technology. Engaging with customers, chatbot, that's the answer. If you got loads of processes and you have very less people to do the work, it's pretty much robotic process automation with some machine learning on top. So based on your problem statement, you strategize and innovate. So I is go ahead and innovate, and design think, pretty much. The M stands for empathy. Yeah, You see what I did there? So M stands for empathy, which means understand your users' business requirements, your business stakeholders, and ethics is part of this. Being responsible towards your users, how they will feel, how they will engage, and how it will disrupt. So how do you manage this as a change? So empathy is quite key. The P and L is actually plan it through, have a blueprint, have a vision, and drive it through leadership. Okay, so I think leaders need to have that plan in place. E stands for, I should know this, it's experiment. AI, you got to start small, you got to start simple. So if you do not experiment, you don't know if you got a problem. You don't know if you got your data which is ready for advanced AI or anything going forward. So it's what it is. So you got to start experimenting, taking that small but brave, bold step and move forward. A stands for being adaptable and agile. AI is complicated tech, but how can you make it simple? How can you see results slowly and quickly? So work on the small pieces and work slowly and build on top of that. So experiment, adapt, and be agile. And last but not least is to constantly improve and improvise. And you close that loop back to the beginning, which is start solving the problem, empathize, replan, experiment again, and adapt. So this is a constant cycle. So if you follow this simple framework, yeah, I think as a business, you can start with AI no matter where you are. But yeah, just keep it simple AI. Tip of the day. Right, we move on to the next question. Can we have the question on the screen, please? Okay, Colin, I wonder if a part of Eve's challenge is about framing these days with distinction is tiny. All business need to use digital. So the question is, how do we frame it so there is no difference? Eve.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd love everyone else's opinions first. Yeah, I think the point is absolutely spot on. Actually, we have a commitment in Leeds to say, make Leeds a digital city. And actually, I think what we really need to get to is just saying, well, we're a city and everyone's maximising digital. So I think the point's really well made. I think how do you change the framing? Interestingly, I think the acceleration in trends we've seen as a consequence of COVID-19 has really moved this on. So we have seen a massive increase in demand for our programme Digital Enterprise, which I talked about before, from SMEs looking for support to adopt digital tools, and not just kind of broadband connectivity, but broader investments. So there's a real kind of advancement there. And I suppose the question is, how do we kind of make sure we bake that in? And then how can startups and entrepreneurs that are, say, like in the AI space, capitalize on that? Because there's a market opportunity there for sure in terms of kind of helping SMEs. And I'm also convinced that in economic recovery, people are going to be looking towards data and applications of ML and AI as ways to drive out more efficiencies and to innovate, because we are going to be in a really deep recession, and so every business from the largest to the smallest is going to be looking at how they can achieve those efficiencies and improvements.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to add?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think to some extent it's a spectrum, isn't it? I think you could almost say that really almost every company these days is an AI company, in the sense that, we're all using Gmail, for example, and you're going to be using with Gmail spam filters, for example, that filter your email every day using machine learning and using AI. So to some extent, pretty much every company that we're talking to is using AI in their operations every single day. And a lot of the products that you'll use in your operations that have machine learning fundamentally built into them. So it's absolutely something that I think you can get quite lost in quite quickly, but actually to some extent you're already using it. But I guess that's one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end, I suppose you've got products and services that needs often very proprietary data sets, often very unique use cases that needs quite niche talent. And I suppose it really depends upon what you really need for the problem you're solving within that spectrum. But you're absolutely right. I think to some extent, actually, machine learning is very much probably involved in what you're already using every single day as well.
Fantastic, thank you. We got next question for you, Lucy. So, can we have the question on the screen? Yeah. Not this one, but I'll ask away. Yeah, on the question of ethics, it's a play on major part in our go-to-market and using varying sources like Turing Institute. So what's the question?
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So Lucy, this is for you. How do we embed and encourage responsible ethical design principles in skill and tool development?
So I'm gonna have to think about that one for a second. I didn't expect that one to go. No, it's a really good question. I mean, I think you could probably answer this question in many different ways, actually. But I think the way that I'd like to approach it is from a sort of diversity and inclusion angle. I think responsible ethical design within software development comes from people. Sorry, I'm just trying to think about how best to answer that question. I don't know if anybody else has maybe a better insight where I'm just sort of gathering my words.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll add on to that if you want. So again, coming from a development perspective, yes, ethics embedded into a design, it's not straightforward. And hence I said we need leaders to drive empathy, vision, and ethics from top-down approach. You obviously can't ask a data scientist, hey, can you add ethics in your code, right? It's not possible straight away. You need that balanced approach of leaders directing and sort of embedding that vision and ethics right from the top, designers to ensure that your design has that embedded in the entire process. Machine learning is probably 10% of the entire AI lifecycle. So the coding part is probably 10% of the entire lifecycle. It's how do you translate and work a lifecycle around your entire application. It is quite critical over here. So when we say guidelines and frameworks, these are pretty much just advise what needs to be done when you implement a solution. For example, transparency. How can you create transparency? So when you're creating an application, you're probably being transparent about, I'm using so-and-so data because of which you're getting so-and-so result. And this is influenced by these parameters. So that is element of transparency that you can embed in the design, yeah, and not in the code, if that makes sense. So your application should tell you that. Then there is element of privacy, trust, and all of that. This is all right from the data layer all the way to the platform and the engagement layer between users. So it's something that needs to be driven as a best practice. So fairness, accountability, responsibility, robustness, and all of this is pretty much an architectural question that needs to be sort of factored in the entire solution design. So yeah, it's a tricky question to answer, and as we discussed earlier, ethics becomes its own topic. And yeah, I think you really need an architect or a designer level person to sort of ensure these are part of the design through and through. So coding alone is not the only answer. It's the design of the solution, I would say.
And I'll jump in there as well too. I think really on Lucy's point, because I think she raises a good point here, which is the diversity and inclusion angle in AI as well. Often I think we get quite bogged down in the technology and almost assign the agency to the technology in itself, but we forget that, as Sherin was saying there, human beings ultimately designing these systems. Yeah. And we often think that somehow as individuals, we're much more rational as human beings in terms of how we design them than, say, a black box of a technology. And we forget that, similar to a machine learning algorithm, we have inputs, our brain processes it, we have outputs, and we assume that we're more rational and more fair than the machine will be in some ways. But actually, we're all prone to our own biases and our own sort of subconscious biases within that can lead to unfairness in the system. And a good example might be Twitter recently. I don't know if you saw a few tweets that went viral where Twitter was essentially, the algorithm was prioritizing in the preview white faces. And that's just a classic case, clearly, where within the data sets and the team building the products, there just simply was obviously a lack of diversity and inclusion in the end-to-end design of the product in itself, and nobody at the team thought to raise it or even thought it was an issue. So I completely agree. I think really, when we're building these systems, I think we need to think more about the biases that we each hold and making sure that that's fair in the end-to-end approach for the product. But then also, I think inherently important within that is, how do you make sure you have a really diverse range of perspectives when you're building these sorts of products, and how do you make sure that diversity is really fundamental within that? So I completely agree.
I think.
Oh, go on. I was going to ask you, Lucy, if you think we're doing enough to get. Do you think we're doing enough to get a diverse set of people into AI?
No.
Yeah.
Go for it.
No, I was just going to say, Harry, it was like you jumped into my brain there and managed to articulate much better than I could the point I was trying to make. I suppose just sort of reiterating your point, like in basic terms, like, if the code is written by people from different backgrounds, unintended bias will always be ironed out in that code, because it's being written by more broad, equal and diverse group of people within society. Now, I think tech as an industry is, there's a stigma around it. We're not known and recognised for being a super diverse and inclusive industry in general, and I think a lot of people are working really hard to change that. I think there's still a lot more that can be done. I think a substantial amount more that can be done. Just to draw on an example from Northcoders that I know. We actually did a diversity survey in January of this year, and it basically showed us that 38% of current Northcoder students were women or of gender minorities, and I thought that was really interesting, because I was really proud of that statistic because of how high it is compared to what we've seen before. But then at the same time, sort of slightly disheartened, because I think there's so much more we can do, and so much more we can push, and so much further we can do to contribute to this and make our industry so much more inclusive. And I think just by doing that, I think opens us up to so many different Oh, I feel like you might have lost me there for a second. Am I back?
The fundamental. Can I come in back? Because I just want to build on that conversation. So my son is almost 14 years old, and he had some choices he could make at the end of year 8 about subjects that he would continue with. He chose to do kind of IT/computer science. He starts year 9. There are virtually no girls doing computer science. So that tells me we are, there's nowhere near we're doing enough, because, we've got to get to girls in particular much younger to kind of encourage them to want to get into tech full stop, let alone kind of ML and artificial intelligence. And then I'd also just speak up about diversity of background beyond kind of what's called in HR terms protected characteristics. So we also need to encourage people from different socio-economic backgrounds, and I know Northcoders do a brilliant job of that in terms of helping people that have maybe been in one profession, like being a plasterer, to be able to get into kind of the tech world, and they bring a perspective which is just so useful, going back to Harry's point around having teams that just look at problems in different ways. So I think it's kind of it's something we've got to just keep banging the drum on, isn't it? And keep investing in.
You're completely right, and I love that you've drawn on the type of people we see coming through Northcoders. I know you know us quite well, but yeah, we have people coming to us that may have worked in retail for years, factory roles, career changes that bring so much so much amazing skill and experience to the industry, not just their technical abilities. And I think these are the people that they're the ones to watch, because they're exposed to so much other things in their previous life, previous career. And when they're giving a platform, like you mentioned about your son, you know, the fact that there's no women or females in that group is it's sad, and something that I'm really passionate about at Northcoders is, although I can't advocate from a technical perspective because I'm not technical, what I love about my role is that I spend a lot of time talking to graduates, talking to students that come through Northcoders, and getting close to them. And if I can be a point of contact that I can encourage people and I can instill confidence in people that they can do it, and with Northcoders as a company providing a platform to do that, it makes me really proud to be in the role that I'm in. So I 100% agree. We've got a way to go, but I think people are we're starting to make changes.
That's brilliant. I think that nicely leads into the next question, which is from Kulvinder. So is there a specific mindset that all communities in the North need to embrace to push and progress the digital and AI ecosystem? So I think yes, and that's precisely one of the reasons we started AI Tech North. So we can see that AI sometimes becomes the technology of few handful corporate SMEs or those who have that little tech advantage. I think as a community, we wanted to sort of balance this out and bring out this power of community. So what AI Tech North is doing is bringing this ecosystem of researchers, SMEs. So we got Technician as one of our strategic partners. We got local council and other universities across the North, really bringing the best of the best tech awareness. And we're also trying to go to the grassroots level, which is other communities and schools and colleges and universities, where we know that's the future. And if we can tell them that it's not about Python coding, it's more than that. It's being responsible, factoring diversity and everything. So as a community, we're trying to bring that responsible AI approach at a wider scale. So I think, yeah, there is that mindset shift that's required, because if you think about it, tech always changes. But if you have the mindset to bring positive, responsible innovations going forward, we have AI today, tomorrow we will be something else. But if you have that mindset, I think we're building something that's long-term going forward. Yeah, anyone wants to add anything on that?
I think from a scale-up perspective, it really depends upon the company you want to build. But I think when it comes to building a scale-up company in AI, I think it's really having a global mindset from day one. I think a lot of the best companies that we see do very well are international from day one. And that means their teams are very international, really across Europe, America, India, really across the world. And their clients as well are very international. You know, unlike more generalist or B2C companies where the market might be quite immediate, you can sell to in a company really anywhere in many cases as deep tech companies. So I really think that thinking globally from day one is important.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think there's couple of more questions that we can take quickly. There's one that I had in my list, which is, where does an AI newbie start off? So this is probably for Harry and Lucy in this case, I guess. So yeah, Lucy, do you want to take it first? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's wanting to explore a career you know, in AI, in tech, it sounds really generic, but like online resources, attending events like this and throwing yourself into the tech industry, attending meetups and tech talks and subjects of interest, I think it's really important. I think exposing yourself to as much as you possibly can within this. I think we're really lucky actually in Leeds and sort of the surrounding areas of North that we do have a really strong tech community. I think attending events and meetups, you see familiar faces and you recognize people and think, oh, I've heard you speak, or I've heard you do that. And I think involving yourself in that it is really, really important if you're wanting to take that first step into any technical role. So very applicable to AI as well.
Awesome. How did you want to,
think Lucy's covered it very well there. I think it's really throwing yourself out there and asking what's possible in the next decade or so, and where do I want to position my career within that? Certainly university, or even institutions. If you don't want to go to university, like Lambda, for example, where it's similar. You can do part time. It doesn't take anything up front. And I think I'd remember as well too that a career in AI doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be an AI data scientist or engineer. And we talked about the importance of having people that can sell an AI product, or having people who are great at operations or fantastic at marketing. We really need those people more than anything else, I think, in many ways. So, I'd note that it's really a broad field, it's a broad sector, and you don't necessarily have to have a PhD in machine learning to be a part of it.
Can I do a big up for further education as well? So don't forget your local colleges. Leeds City College have a massive intake of students that do gaming, and loads of them actually end up working in digital businesses, because when they make the decision to go to college, they're not thinking, oh, I want to be like a developer or get into AI, but all the skills they learn on the gaming course makes them job ready. So don't forget FE as well as HE.
Awesome. Okay, we got one last question, which is, what do you want to say who are afraid of AI and technology taking over? So open to the forum.
Would you want a pithy two-liner or something, Sherin, to finish off?
Yeah, go on, if you got one.
I'd just say, don't be scared. I think we should all be optimistic about the future. The robots are not going to come and take away our jobs. If anything, kind of the application of ML/AI is going to create jobs. And I just think we need to kind of educate ourselves as far as possible to make sure we understand it. As leaders, as a leader that's not, I'm not a digital specialist, but I think leaders like me really just need to educate ourselves, participate in events like today. I've learned some stuff from you. Great, Sherin. And, and make sure that we kind of help get involved, and don't be afraid of discussing and entering into the dialogue. That wasn't very pithy, was it? Sorry.
Oh, good though.
I'd say such a hard on this one. I'd go and say have a quick chat with your Alexa, and I think you'll quickly see like how far we've come, but you'll also see just how far we have to go. Like we talk a lot about, there's a lot of podcasts and talks about will AI take over, but we're talking often about general intelligence and what have you, and that's a very far afield thing. At the moment, we're talking very much about very specific use cases, and we were promised driverless cars at this point, right? But I suppose you have Tesla and what have you, but there's still a long way to go there. So I would say just make sure you make that distinction. Talking about general AI is very different from talking about automation in the near term, which is a bit more specific. And I think I just close on like, with any technology, you can use it for good or bad. So computer vision, for example, you can either use an authoritarian regime or what have you, or for weapons, but you can also use it for diagnosing cancer more effectively. Or as we said earlier, like improving recycling to an order of magnitude that gets us towards our net zero targets and helps us combat climate change. So I think it's being aware as you can as to what's out there, how's the technology being used, what's possible, and go and watch documentaries like The Social Dilemma as well, which talk a little bit about the decisions that go into these sorts of systems. It's a great documentary on Netflix called Social Dilemma, which talks about the thinking behind the algorithms of Facebook, Google, and what have you. And whether or not you agree or disagree with the premise of it, you start to see the sorts of decisions that get made in these sorts of algorithms. And I think the more that the public is educated on this, the more as a society we can make the right choices and the right decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I think probably like in really simple terms for me, it's about people, not robots. If you skill up and understand it, rather than running away from it, it can be really useful. Is probably my very quick one-liner on the subject.
And from my side, is we need to manage the AI expectations. So yes, we think that robots and all that stuff, but I think we got to realize it's not super intelligent. It's really simple, narrow AI. One input does something in the model and gives you an output. Image, object detection, voice into text. Really simple things, but super powerful from the way it is.
I'll probably add very quickly though that although I say that, it is easy to be complacent, and I think we probably do need to realize that saying I do challenge myself sometimes, where I think, just because technology has always created more jobs in the past, it doesn't necessarily hold true for the future. And I think we probably do need to think quite hard about, how we think about reskilling or redesigning our education systems to account for the next 10, 20 years, and how we think about really making sure that's beneficial across the country. And I think really probably thinking hard about this debate over the coming years. So it's certainly one I think to be thinking about in the coming months.
Awesome. Okay, I think that brings us to the close of the session. I'd like to make a small announcement. I know most of you might be feeling, oh yeah, this session must have been too much to take, or maybe it's just the tip of the iceberg. But I think we have a Q&A form. I know there's a lot more questions out there, so we will try to respond that on our social media. But there's Q&A form. Please let us know what are your pain points. Is there any other questions that you want to address, and really how you can leverage the power of community. We are here if you have any questions. Ask anything, tech, strategy, or ethics. Be there as a community to sort of respond to you. And last but not least, we would love to hear what topics you would like to hear going forward in the future. One last thing, which is we all know that AI is a complicated tech, and we have put a lot of effort as a community to bring the power of community to your. What I mean by that is we bring in leaders, we bring in designers, we bring in professionals across our events, not just IX, also big events. So we got a big event in October, 12th and 13th of October, which is just around the corner, where we have 60+ experts, 30+ tech sessions, and loads of keynote sessions. And what we got, thank all the panelists and great speakers today for bringing such a great, insightful views and outlook about AI, and sharing your ideas and your opinions with us. So yeah, I think we should give a big round of applause to everyone. Stay safe, look after yourself, and thank you again for being part of this lovely session. Thank you, everyone.